Hey everyone! Ever since I started my YouTube channel, I started using one specific console way more than I used to. So I wanted to go over my impressions of the Retron 5. After having it for a couple of years but barely touching it, I started using it regularly the past 8 or so months to capture footage, and my thoughts on the console has changed over time. I used to think it was a novelty, something cool to have, but never really use. I used to think, why would anyone play a Super Nintendo game on the Retron 5 when they could use original hardware with an original controller? To a lot of purists, that's the only logical way to play retro games. And that thought process of mine was put to the test when I needed to capture footage for the channel. So let's go over the system and see how my opinion has evolved over time. The main selling points of the console is the amount of different systems the Retron 5 can play while using original cartridges and controllers on a modern television. One console to play all your retro games can be very appealing. The Retron 5 can play the original Nintendo and Super Nintendo, as well as their Japanese counterparts, the Famicom and Super Famicom, so this allows you to play imported games, as well as the Sega Master System, Sega Genesis, Game Boy, Game Boy Color, and Game Boy Advance. That's 9 different systems being played through one console. That is really good value, and it's a massive space saver. The output for the console is the standard HDMI, which means it's compatible with modern TVs. You don't need component or composite cables to play retro games, which means you don't need a CRT TV taking up space, especially if you have a smaller home. Now, with so many different systems, you need to figure out what controller you want to use. The system is compatible with original Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and Genesis controllers, and it has multiple slots for multiplayer games like Mortal Kombat. The system is also very adaptable. You can use any controller to play any game you wish, which means you can play a Genesis game with a Nintendo controller if you really want. I don't know why you would be missing buttons if you do, but it is possible. Personally, I use an 8BitDo SN30 controller, essentially a wireless Super Nintendo controller, and I use it for most games, including the handheld system. I own very few Genesis games, so personally I use a third-party controller for that. There is a wireless controller that comes with the system, but honestly, it's terrible. Mine has lots of issues with it. Granted, I bought my Retron 5 and controller used a few years back, but the controller was basically unusable when I got it. It has buttons that don't work, so I can't even use it if I tried. The controller itself has such an uncomfortable form factor, and it feels cheaply made. It is wireless, which is nice, but it doesn't matter if it doesn't work. There isn't even a D-pad. It has this very clicky joystick style thumb piece, which feels terrible for playing retro games because they were designed specifically for a D-pad. It does have enough buttons for Genesis games though. Again, nice, but since some of them don't work, it doesn't really matter. I highly recommend any other retro controller you can find. The console itself feels fairly cheap and light. The material used for the outer shell feels like it can break easily. I know this isn't made by one of the big manufacturers like Sony, and judging by feel, it shows. The connector pins for the cartridges are also fairly picky. I usually need to insert a game multiple times before the console registers it, except for the slot for handheld games. This feels very sturdy and it works basically every time. Moving on to the features, the one I care about the most is the HDMI port. Being able to play Metroid Fusion on my HD TV is truly great. There is also an SD slot which can be very useful. You can use it for save data, and I know a lot of people use it for translation patches for imported games. Personally, I've never used it, but I heard it works really well. Within the settings of the system, there is an abundance of features. From aspect ratio to scan lines to button mapping, you can adjust the experience to exactly what you want. I personally don't change the settings very often, but I am glad I have the option to do so. The one thing I did change was the in-game menu pop-up. Because of the controller I use, I would accidentally turn off my controller when trying to access the menu. But because of the customization options available, it was an easy fix. As for the games themselves, they run extremely well. Basically, any game I tested worked with no delays, input lag, or frame drops, as long as the game was authentic. So we talked about what it can do, but the real question is, who is it for? There's lots of ways to play retro games. The Switch Online service, Nintendo, Super Nintendo, and Genesis mini consoles, virtual shops on the Wii U or 3DS, compilation discs of older Sega games, let alone playing on original hardware. So I thought about it, and in my opinion, there's very specific circumstances for this console to be worth it. 1. You have an existing library of physical cartridges, or you plan on collecting them shortly, but you don't own a CRT TV. 2. You have limited space and cannot fit multiple consoles hooked up at once, and you tend to jump from game to game regularly. Or 3, which is the main reason I use it, for the ability to use an HD capture card for my physical collection. Before my YouTube channel, this system was essentially collecting dust, but now I use it to test my retro pickups and capture footage for games that aren't on any virtual system. But if you don't own a lot of physical games, or you don't plan on it in the future, this probably isn't for you. If you just want to play the classic games like Super Mario Bros. 3, you have lots of other methods of playing them. If you don't need to capture footage for YouTube, Twitch, or anything else like that, then I wouldn't bother with it. I can't even say this is for the hardcore collectors, because if you consider yourself to be that person, you probably already have original hardware in your collection, which to me is why the HDMI output is this console's best feature, along with the number of compatible systems. As for me, this console is a game changer. I live in a bachelor studio apartment, basically one big room, so space is very valuable to me. I own a growing number of retro games, I need to capture footage for the channel, and I don't own a CRT TV. So honestly, this console is perfect for me. At this moment, my channel wouldn't exist without this console. However, if I never made the channel, I wouldn't really need the console, so it creates an interesting viewpoint for me. If you think you need it for any aspect of your game room, it works extremely well, and I think it'll be a good addition, as long as you use a different controller. I cannot stress that enough, do not use the controller that comes with it. And there we have it, my thoughts on the Retron 5. Let me know down below how you prefer to play your retro games. I feel like most people either play on original hardware or on a virtual console of some sort. If you enjoy the video, please hit the thumbs up, it really does help out a lot. If you're new here, be sure to subscribe for more video game related content, and if you want to share the video or channel with anyone who might enjoy it, I would really appreciate it. Thank you for making it to the end of the video, and thanks for watching. Honestly, it still amazes me this thing can play so many different systems so easily.